this whole several weeks, we're looking at freeing ourselves from conditioning. And I don't think it's anywhere more obvious than around gender conditioning. The thousands and thousands of images that we absorb through media, but also through our own personal life. And those are a bit different now than they were 50 years ago, 100 years ago for sure. But what hasn't changed is the influence of those ideas. And those might work quite well for many of the people. They don't work well for all of the people, that's for sure. And when they don't work well, when we don't align well with it, it causes so much misery. So this was the area my mom was a woman in and I grew up in. And there was this white, heteronormative, men are macho, women are in the kitchen kind of an idea. And when my mom went to university, she was very smart and very hard worker. When she went to university, she wanted to be an architect, but for some reason applied for engineering. And it was right after the war. And she was flunked out of mathematics, which she was a genius in, and told basically to get out of engineering, that they needed the spaces for the men returning from the war. And that affected her whole life. She was bitter about that her whole life because she said, I know I got a very high mark on that. I compared my answers with the smartest guy in the room. And I said, well, why didn't you fight? And she said, fight what? How could I fight against that? The whole culture was built for men to be in professions and not the women. So the cost of that, as I've seen it personally through her bitterness, and she went to secretarial school and then put my dad through university, that was such a common experience. And I can see how, just through what she shared throughout her life, how hurt she was by that and how limited she was by that. And then we have many different models, and 9 to 5 is a really fun movie that was quite groundbreaking at the time that they brought that out. I think that was, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago now probably. But Ms. Magazine with Gloria Steinem and Xena, Warrior Princess, and Michelle Obama, and how she has been such a leader and did so much wonderful work in the White House. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all of these women are women we recognize. Ellen and Alice Walker on the cover of Ms. Magazine, and Oprah. And then this week, Alexandria, just the way she stood up and so calmly laid it out, the disrespect from that representative, and how she has to stand up for herself as a respect for her parents and for his daughters and wife. And she was so clear, and there's so many clear examples. And for me personally, Ellen DeGeneres was such a great influence, because there was before Ellen and after Ellen. And when she came out in the early 90s, it was a big deal. The courage of some people has really paved the way for a lot of social change. And now we get to toxic masculinity and rape culture. And a lot of the reasons that we have these roles that we're forced into is because the patriarchy wants to maintain the power. And they do that in so many different ways. The kind of messages that boys get: men don't cry, man up, stop being such a girl, don't be a wimp, don't be a pussy, be a man. And that's the toxic masculinity idea of a man is being really pushed against. Will Smith's son has such a interesting fashion sense. And Pharrell Williams actually too, talking about the new masculinity and what does that mean. And then there's a guy like Zac Efron who's pretty traditional looking. And when I was doing the images for this, I actually checked to make sure that he didn't have any Me Too accusations, because it's so common that people do. And President Obama is such a good example of a decent person who stands up for what's right. I don't know if any of you have watched 13 Reasons Why. Season 3 was, a lot of it was about rape culture. And really clear and not pulling any punches, that's for sure. And so to understand how women's roles and toxic masculinity work is a big topic to really look into, and a lot of us have done that, I know, and we have a lot of understanding about this. And in a conversation like this, there's not enough time to really get into a lot of detail, but just to really acknowledge the complexity, the reasons for rape culture and for toxic masculinity is a power grab. It's a way to keep power. And when that's what we're up against, it takes a lot to understand for ourselves, to stop shaming ourselves. It takes a lot to work with these kinds of things. And these really shape our ideas about who we are. So there's some traditional gender stereotypes, feminine and masculine. And now we are seeing so many more different expressions of this gender identity, as well as stereotypical or not stereotypical behavior. And it doesn't make sense in any way that we should be splitting ourselves off when in fact we all have masculine and we all have feminine qualities. But we're herded into this narrow range of what we can express. And we pay a price when we defy gender stereotypes. It might still be worth it to us, but we pay a price for it. So we might consider I am a man, I'm a woman, I'm cisgender, meaning that my feeling of the gender that I am matches my physical gender at birth. Transgender is when somebody feels like they're a woman in a man's body or vice versa. And then there's sexual orientation, which is a little bit different, but also really influences us. We have all of these different ways now of naming ourselves, which is really interesting, and it helps to free us all from this narrow range of options. I think it's something we're going to look into in our inquiry, but just to recognize that there's such a diversity in people, and it's so wonderful to see so many people pushing the edges of that to try and get rid of these stereotypes, to try and allow people to really express whoever they feel like they are inside, and that changes all the time, and to be valued for that. So let's stop here and do an inquiry for several minutes. The conditioned beliefs we're going to look at first, and we're going to look at them at a couple of different ages. So the question that we're looking at is, what was your idea of who you are and who you were supposed to be based on the role that society assigned to you? So whether that was a man, a woman, boy, girl, a lot of the conditioning happens when we're children, for sure. And we're going to look at these at different ages. So let's start with kind of pre-puberty, or any time in childhood that you wanted to work with. So bring to mind kind of a general experience. What was your daily life like in terms of being aligned with the stereotype? So if you were a girl, were you the pretty girl who never got her clothes dirty? Were you the tomboy who always got in trouble? If you were a boy, were you like kind of a good at baseball? Did you like to hang out and, with worms and snakes and things? Or were you more sensitive? What was your alignment with the stereotype? How did you fail to measure up? And how did you measure up? What was the pressure that you put on yourself or that others put on you? So let's start with, we'll do several minutes for each of these. So as an age, 8 to 12 or whatever age before puberty? How closely did you align with the stereotypes for your assigned role? How did you fail or how did you meet that? Really be present with yourself in your body as you're looking at that. And you might have images or memories come in of some different things that were happening around that time. Just look at them as though they are images or memories from the past, which is what they are. We're not actually back there now. You could always do some tapping or open your eyes, put it on the wall across from you, trace the empty space on the outside. Some of these might be painful. And when we're looking at what it cost us, it might have cost us being bullied, being on the outside, but it might have also cost us of our lost authenticity and opportunities for expressing ourselves authentically. And that's a cost too. So if we are controlling ourselves, especially if we've internalized that control, notice that as well. What did it cost you to align with it, to defy it? What was your experience? And this could be true for all of the different ages. What were the social sanctions? Did people make fun of sissies? Talk about a tomboy is never going to get married? These are all ways that we began to form our ideas about who we were supposed to be, how we were supposed to act. And then move the timeline forward into after you went through puberty. So maybe junior high, high school, or as a young adult. So our ideas are already well formed by this time. And how closely did you align with the stereotype or defy it? Or maybe you just failed to measure up. You couldn't be that tough boy or that beautiful, graceful woman. And what did it cost you? Either to try to fit in or to defy the expectations. Stay really connected with your breath and with your body. We're looking at a period of time that can be very painful through our young adult years, especially. And the social control and sanctions can get a lot stronger during junior high and high school. What was your experience with that? Were you bullied, shamed, or maybe you were one of the people that was doing that? Maybe you stood up for a friend that happened to. Maybe you couldn't. To see if we could look at that without shame, more as a wow, look at what that was like for me. And how did that shape me? This is not something we would have been aware of at the time necessarily. It's more something we can look back on with the way our culture has moved on this. What might you have done if you had more opportunities that weren't limited by your gender role? Maybe it would have been a different job, a whole different life. And thoughts come in as words and pictures, so we could work with them like that, hearing words or maybe putting them up, having a look. What was your experience as a teenager and a young adult? And then bring that to a close. We're going to move the timeline forward. So, how did those experiences as a younger child and a young adult move into your adult life, right up to the present? So, if you had a longer life, you could chunk that a little bit, maybe look at your 20s and 30s compared to 40 and later, but however you'd like to work with that. And what's your experience now? At some point during that time, you might have rebelled against those quietly or vocally. When we're out on our own, we have more freedom. And we don't have unlimited freedom. We're still facing social sanctions if we fail to measure up or to align with that. But maybe as an adult, we can find other people who agree with us. So, what was your experience as you moved through your adult life? And there could be all kinds of emotions. There might be anger, sadness, grief. What did it cost you to be part of a culture that does this, that controls us by gender roles? And then looking at that kind of as a whole, through the whole of your life as a child, the beliefs that you formed, your experience as a teenager, young adult, and as an adult up until now. What's your experience with that right now? Do you feel like there's still a lot of pressure? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like nobody much cares about you anymore in terms of that? What's your experience now? And then over the next minute or so, let that come to a close. I wanted to make a note on things to follow up on. That's often these inquiries bring up a lot. We don't really have time to go into too deeply here, but that could really be interesting to sit with more. And we look at freedom. So we don't have rules about gender expression when we're free from our conditioning. So if we're sad, we cry, whether we're male or female. We express anger. And we saw really this week from Alexandria Ortiz, oh, sorry, I can't remember her last name, AOC, the price we pay when we step out of line according to somebody else. And she didn't step out of any legal lines. She's legally representing her district in Washington. But this man who was Yoho, who was calling her a fucking bitch on the steps of the building where they work and where the law and the Constitution of the United States is supposed to be upheld, he felt entitled to do that. And she expressed herself beautifully in terms of laying out what was going on there and how she couldn't stay silent. She needed to name what was going on. And then in 2020, that's still very much alive, the gender rules and roles and the lashing out at women who move forward into positions of power. So that kind of ease and freedom and authenticity and flexibility, loving who we are, isn't neutral around this yet. Even if it might be for in most of our life, most of our daily life, it's still, we live in a culture where it's not neutral. So for the last few minutes, I'd like to work with grieving lost authenticity. I can open my window of tolerance to explore a wide range of gender expression in myself and in other people. And if we think back, especially to our teenage years and early adult years, what never occurred to you as a possibility for your life? Because we were kind of head down, this is what's expected of me. And it might be career, it might be something else, personal choices. What does your heart know about this? What never occurred to me as a possibility for my life? Or it might be something that we thought about a lot, but that we didn't follow through with because we knew that was going to be too big of a fight. We weren't going to win. In a world of no gender roles, what would be different for you? Notice your body and breath. And is there anything right now that you could do to get a little bit more freedom around this for yourself? Maybe a shift in an emotion or thought. Maybe there's an action that you'd want to take. And sit with that for another minute or so, and then we'll finish the inquiry and come back to the group. What would I do if I was truly free? Who would I be?